بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. I ask Allah Ta'ala to grant us all the sincere intention and the good comprehension. Allahumma ameen. It came in the hadith narrated by Al-Bukhaariyy and Muslim and Al-Bayhaqiyy and others that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, من أحب أن يزحزح عن النار ويدخل الجنة فلتأته منيته وهو يؤمن بالله واليوم الآخر وليأت إلى الناس بما يحب أن يؤتى إليه. It means whoever loves to be distanced from hellfire and admitted into paradise, then let him die while believing in Allah and the last day. And let him treat the people how he likes to be treated. So in this hadith, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is telling us that the person who wants to be safe from being tortured in hellfire and wants to enter paradise needs to implement this, what he said here. Let him implement the matters which the Prophet mentioned in this hadith. And the first of those is believing in Allah and the last day. And the last day means the Day of Judgment. And this is so because the proper belief in Allah and His Messenger is the best deed that one would do. As the Prophet said, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, in the hadith, أفضل الأعمال إيمان بالله ورسوله. The best of deeds is having the belief in Allah and His Messenger, meaning and all His messengers. And this is the essential reason for being safe in the hereafter. That's because all of the good deeds are not accepted without having the proper belief. And amongst the basics of the creed is believing that Allah has power over everything. Whatever Allah willed to be, shall be. And whatever Allah willed not to be, He willed for something not to be, it will never be. No one can stop what Allah has willed. So if something happened, it's because Allah willed for it to happen. And if something exists, it's because Allah willed for it to exist. Likewise, if something did not happen, it's because Allah did not will for it to happen. And if something did not exist, then that's because Allah did not will for that thing to exist. If something happens to me or you, it's because it was eternally willed by Allah to happen, yani for that thing to come to pass at that exact moment that it happened. And nothing could have stopped it. It is also amongst the foundations of the belief to know that the one who created this world and all the different creations, he does not resemble any of those creations in any way. Allah Ta'ala created the oceans and the seas and rivers, and He created the fishes. You can say fish, and you can say fishes. He created the fish in these waters and all of the sea creatures. He created the land animals and the insects, including the lions and the giraffes and the elephants and the zebras. He created the birds, the doves, the parrots, the eagles. And Allah Ta'ala created the jinn. This particular creation whom we don't see in their true form, but they see us. And He created the angels, another specific type of creation. They are not males, they are not females. They were all created at once from light. And Allah Ta'ala created the human beings. Adam, alayhi salam, Prophet Adam, and Lady Hawa, Lady Eve, and their progeny, who are the children of Adam all over the earth, and all those who died throughout the thousands of years. And Allah Ta'ala, who created all of those creations and everything else, does not resemble any of them in any way whatsoever. So as you know, Allah Ta'ala is not imagined in the mind. Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala is not above the arsh, as some say, above the throne. He's not in the skies. He's not above the skies. He's not under the skies. Allah exists without a place and without a direction, as He always existed. As He always existed without ever changing, because change is not an attribute of Allah. It's an attribute of what is weak and in need. Hence, it's a creation. The good deeds, they would not lead one to safety in the hereafter if the person died as a non-believer. If the person died upon any kufr belief, a blasphemous belief, a belief that contradicts what the Prophet ﷺ taught, like in the foundations of Islam. The person has to believe correctly in Allah Ta'ala and in all of the prophets and messengers of Allah. Hence, the Prophet ﷺ mentioned it here first. He said, "Man ahabba an yuzahzaha anin nar," whoever loves to be distanced from hellfire, to be far away from hellfire, to be in a place that's far from hellfire. He wants in between him and hellfire a lot of distance. He doesn't want to be near it. وَيُدْخَلَ الْجَنَّةِ, and he wants to be admitted into paradise, the place of everlasting bliss and happiness and joy for the believers in the hereafter. He said, فَلْتَأْتِهِ مَنِيَّتُهُ وَالْمَنِيَّةِ هِيَ الْمَوْتِ. And al-maniyya here, in this hadith, it means death. So the Prophet said, فَلْتَأْتِهِ مَنِيَّتُهُ, then let him die, وَهُوَ يُؤْمِنُ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ, while he believes in Allah correctly and in the last day. This includes believing in the prophets of Allah and Prophet Muhammad, of course, believing in him correctly. So the person, in order to enter al-Islam, as you know, they would say, La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. They wouldn't just say La ilaha illallah. It's understood that they have to say both statements. So even from this hadith, the Prophet explicitly said, وَهُوَ يُؤْمِنُ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ. For him to believe in Allah and the last day, without a doubt this includes believing in Prophet Muhammad and in all the prophets. And the last day is the day of judgment. The person has to believe that there is a day of judgment, as Allah revealed in the Quran, as the Prophet ﷺ taught. It is a day that is 50,000 years long. It's a very long day. And on that day, many things will happen. And all of the people will be resurrected and held to account for everything that they did in this life. The angels will be there. All of the jinn will be there, as well as all the humans will. And Allah, the Exalted, will judge the people and the creations. And Allah will not be in a place, because Allah exists without a place. Allah is not a body. He is not something like light, like a light that moves or something like that, or like the air. No, Allah is not like any of the creation at all. He exists without a place, and His attributes do not change. Subhanahu. The second matter that the Prophet mentioned in this hadith, after mentioning believing in Allah and the last day, he said, وَلْيَأْتِ إِلَى النَّاسِ بِمَا يُحِبُّ أَن يُؤْتَى إِلَيْهِ. Which means, and let this person who wants to be distanced from hellfire and admitted into paradise, a further thing upon having the correct belief and dying upon it, let him treat the people how he likes to be treated. So this second matter that came in the hadith is an explicit encouragement for one to have husnul khuluq, good manners. For the Prophet ﷺ emphasized that one should treat others in the same way that they like for others to treat them. The Prophet ﷺ said in another hadith, Al-birru husnul khuluq, which means al-birr is having good manners. And al-birr, generally speaking, is everything which is good. All the good deeds are included in al-birr. The praised deeds are included in al-birr. However, the Prophet ﷺ, when he was asked about al-birr, he could have said something else, but he said, al-birru husnul khuluq. Al-birr is husnul khuluq, good manners. And having good manners is based on three things. The first one is تحمل أذى الغير, being patient with the harm of others, and كف الأذى عن الغير, for one to hold himself or herself back from harming others, and not harming others. And the third one is الإحسان إلى الغير من عرف لك ومن لم يعرف لك. For one to show kindness and goodness to others, those who were kind to you and those who were not. This is the definition of having good manners. To bear the harm of others, it means if they harm you, you do not respond back with harming them. And it also means for you not to allow the harm of others towards you to make you commit sins and disobey Allah. Rather, you are patient with that, seeking the acceptance of Allah. And when we say harm here, this means someone actually harmed you. Because some people interpret harm in different ways. It doesn't mean because you got hurt that necessitates that someone actually harmed you. Because some people, their hearts are really sensitive. And so something that is actually not haram at all might still hurt them. But it doesn't mean that that person who did it is bad now, or that they're sinful. Because they wouldn't be sinful if they didn't fall into a sin. Now, if they did something with the intention to hurt you, even though originally that thing was not sinful, for example, but they know or they knew that it would hurt you, and so they did it to hurt you, then they're sinful because they are knowingly hurting a Muslim. But let us also remember that just because something makes us feel bad in our hearts, it doesn't automatically mean that someone was sinful. Remember that. So here we're talking about if a person was unjust to you. If a person was unjust to you, if a person harmed you, they committed a sin against you. Subhanallah, even in this situation, having husnul khuluq, having good manners, is bearing their harm and not responding back with harming them. A second part of good manners is to hold oneself back from harming others. كف الأذى عن الغير. That means for one to neither harm others verbally nor physically. And this requires effort and for one to watch their doings and their heart closely, to have al-muraqabah. This is because harming another, especially with the tongue, is something easy. It's something easy. Subhanallah, even though the person may not see it as them really doing something so bad, but it would harm a person. Some people, they only tend to look at something that is so bad as like physically hitting someone or like stealing something from someone or breaking something that belongs to them, something like that. And because we tend to use our tongue a lot, a person doesn't really look at what they say as that bad. And they might think in their heart, I didn't take anything from anyone. I didn't hit anyone. I didn't break anything that belongs to anyone. I take care of people's belongings. However, they might hurt someone with their tongue. And the mistreatment of the tongue many times is more harmful on the person than harming them physically. That is, that many times the harm of the tongue, it would leave an effect on that person much bigger than a physical harm. Sometimes years would pass after a harm of the tongue took place, and still you would find that that wound has not healed. SubhanAllah, there are people that carry around these like wounds, and some of them have carried something like that for like 50 years, 60 years. And if they see that person, it's as if that wound is like fresh again. Or if they hear something about that person, or they hear their name or something like that. This is also something that we should not want to keep in our hearts, because it causes a lot of damage to us. It causes distress to us. Like, the one that is doing that might think like, oh, I'm not going to forget this. But you're actually harming yourself. You are. And they may not accept that until 20, 30 years when they see the damage of what that has done to them for 20, 30 years. At times a person would say something to another person and it would break their heart. And they would not forget that, ever, until they die. As for the wound of the body, SubhanAllah, like a physical harm, it heals very fast at times. Very fast, and then the person would just forget about it. The third part of good manners is for the person to be kind to others, yani to show ihsan towards them, to show goodness towards the other person or the other people. Whether they were kind to him or her, or they harmed him or her. Whether they appreciated and recognized all of the kindness and goodness that was given to them, was shown to them, or they did not appreciate and recognize any of that, or some of it. And this is not easy for many people. It's not easy. It's not hard to treat someone kind who has treated you kind or was good to you. That's not hard. You find that your heart opens for this person when you think about what benefit has come to me from this person. SubhanAllah. And this is something that some people don't even think about sometimes. But it's good to think like that. When you think what benefit has come to me from this person, and you have so many things that come to mind, your heart opens for that person, doesn't it? You feel relief in yourself towards that person. You feel good. SubhanAllah. To have good manners is to show goodness and kindness to those who showed you goodness and kindness, and to those who harmed you. You can see how this is so hard for most people to do. For just your average person, this is extremely hard on the nafs. One time our Shaykh, Shaykh Abdullah, may Allah raise his rank, he advised one of his students, saying, Kun كالشجرة المثمرة يضربها الناس بعصيهم فتلقي الثمرة عليهم. He said, be like the tree that bears fruits. The people hit it with their sticks, and in return, it gives them fruits. Yani, people hit it. Obviously, you're not like hurting the tree when you hit it, but it's being hit. If you look at the analogy that's given here, yani, subhanallah, the Shaykh is saying, people get a stick and they hit this tree, but what happens? What's the result of that? The result of that is that fruits fall down. It gives them fruits. It gives them something sweet, something beautiful, something good. So he told some of his students, he said, be like that. Be like the tree that bears fruits. The people hit it with their sticks, and in return, it gives them fruits. And our teacher said, this is how the believer needs to be. And subhanallah, this is not easy. However, this is how the believer should be. Normally, if a person, this should not be the norm actually, but this is the usual situation. That if a person hurts one of us, our nafs wants to seek revenge, one way or another. One way or another. And the person would also not want to be like a major sinner, and so they might seek revenge in a way that they think it's not really hurting anyone, or by doing something that originally it's not sinful. It's something that's not sinful. But their nafs actually led them to doing that thing to that person because of something they have against them in their heart. Some people, they fool themselves. They lie to themselves. They would do something and they're like, oh, they're sticking to the fact that it's originally something that's fine. It just happens. But they lied to themselves because actually along the way, their heart made them do that purposely to a person to make them feel good, even if it was for a second of feeling good. This is not lost. عند Allah. Yani to Allah, these things are not lost. Everything is recorded. That's why it came in the Quran, if a person does, what means? If a person does an atom's worth of evil, you know what an atom is? It's so tiny. The one who does an atom's worth of evil, they will find that in their book on the Day of Judgment. That's why on the Day of Judgment, people will look at their book of deeds, they will say, Subhanallah, this book does not leave anything out. Ya Allah, this is recorded in here? Allahu Akbar. They will find things that they never imagined would be recorded in their book of deeds. Because they lie to themselves and they try to fool themselves when they do these things. The reward of showing ihsan towards someone who does not appreciate your ihsan, your goodness, and isn't kind to you, is much more than the reward you would get for showing goodness to someone who is kind to you. Subhanallah. This is where a lot of people, most of us, this is where we slip. That when someone hurts us, in any way that is, immediately our reaction is to do something to hurt them. To put a barrier up, or to put something up to hurt the person. I'm talking about to hurt the person. Although the way to get a higher rank from Allah is when a person hurts you, you treat them good. This is actually one of the ways to get a really high rank. And there's no way out of it for anyone who wants to seek the acceptance of Allah. There's no way out. If we haven't reached it now, may Allah grant us to reach it. Allahumma ameen. But if we haven't reached it, we're only delaying it. We can gather everything else, but if we don't have these traits that we're mentioning here, we're only delaying ourselves. It's not the case that, oh, you can do other things, but if you don't have these, you'll reach the acceptance of Allah still. No, it's not like that. A person might not be sinful because they're not falling into any sins. That's if they're truly not falling into any sins. Because it's rare to find someone who truly does not fall into sins. But to find a person who has reached these traits, subhanallah, it's extremely rare. Imagine having people like Sheikh Abdullah just everywhere. Imagine how the world would be if the person sitting next to you was like Sheikh Abdullah. Even if it was a female, but they had those honorable, praised traits, how would that be? And the person sitting over there was like Sheikh Abdullah, and the one that you're texting or messaging was like Sheikh Abdullah. How would the response be? So the reward of showing goodness towards those, especially those who don't appreciate it from you, or they have harmed you, or they look down at you, showing good treatment to them is much more rewardable than if you showed good treatment to that sister that you like, that you speak to. And she gives you flowers and buys you gifts and invites you out for coffee. Usually the person just inclines to the person who's kind to them. And they say, oh, forget that person. I'm not even gonna give them the time of day. That's easy to cut a person like that, who treats you bad, who hurts you, who has done something to you that your heart could not bear, for example. It's easy to just cut them off. But it's not easy to go to them and extend goodness to them genuinely, for the sake of Allah. If you maintain kinship ties with those family members who don't maintain it with you, يعني, you visit them and they do not visit you. And you know that they don't visit you, and maybe they haven't visited you in years, but you still go and visit them for the sake of Allah. For many people, this is not easy. And all that I'm saying here, it's very, very, very hard for most women to do, especially. Not all women, but many women, they have a very strong tendency to make a person feel bad if they hurt them. Many women have this in them. They have this strong tendency to hurt someone back, to find a way to hurt them, even if it's like in their head, like it's like the smallest thing, but it makes them feel good to do it. And so if a woman had some cousins, for example, some female cousins, who did not like her or did not visit her for years, for a while, and on top of that, for example, she heard that they were speaking about her, gossiping about her, it would be so easy for her to say, I'm not going to visit them anymore. I will never step foot in their house. However, if she wants a higher rank, she would need to go and visit them. She's not even allowed to cut ties with them. If she doesn't have an excuse to do that, she's not allowed to. Just because a person spoke about her doesn't give her an excuse to cut ties with them. How many people have cut family ties? How many people don't call their aunts or uncles or cousins or their cousins' kids, for example, and other family members? How many people have cut these people off on purpose? And how many people have forgotten about them because life just takes over? Religiously, we are obligated to keep kinship ties with many people, subhanallah, from both our father's side and our mother's side, if they were Muslim. If they were Muslim, we are talking about the obligation here. The obligation is, if they were Muslim, we have to keep kinship ties with them. So if you're able to visit them physically, then you would visit them. And if you're not able to visit them, then you would call, for example. And you would call at least during the Eids, the two Eids. Perhaps you would call them during Ramadan and say Ramadan Mubarak. If any of them get married, you would call and congratulate if you're not able to be there in attendance. If someone dies, you would attend the funeral. If you're not able to, you would call and give your condolences, for example. So they need to feel that you have not cut them off. And for different people, that may be different. So some of them are perfectly fine with just hearing from you 2 times a year, for example, while some family members would not. They would want to have more contact. Every one of us likes for people to speak to them honestly, without lying to them. So we should only say the truth when speaking to others. Each one of us likes that if someone promises us something, that person fulfills their promise. So likewise, if we promise another person something, then we should fulfill that promise. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he taught us that if a person promises a child something, then they should fulfill the promise to that child. What usually happens nowadays is that if someone promises a child something and they don't do it, they don't even think twice about that. They'll just be like, oh, he's a child, he'll forget. Oh, look at him, he's eating ice cream, he won't even remember. But the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he taught us that one should not do that. If you promise a child something, you fulfill your promise. So what about if you promise other people that? Like your mother or your father or your spouse or your teacher or your neighbor. If you promise someone something, you should fulfill that promise. If a person promised a non-Muslim something, let them fulfill that promise, as long as, of course, it's good, something good. Because this is how we would like for people to treat us. If someone promised us something, we would love for them to fulfill that promise. And when they do, it makes us happy. We like that. Most of the people, they like for others to treat them kindly. to not lie to them, to not cheat them, to not harm them, to forgive them if they did something wrong. But on the other hand, most of the people, they do not treat the people like that. Although they demand this from others. They cheat others, they harm others without a right. And they do not pardon and forgive easily. Some people, they don't pardon and forgive at all. And many times people show kindness and goodness to another, and then that other person harms them. Subhanallah. That's how some people are. They benefit, they come to you and they benefit, and then they turn around and speak ill of you. Or they want you to help them, and you do for the sake of Allah, and they take that benefit and they harm you. Or they look down at you. Or they carry ill feelings for you in their heart. One of our teachers said, some people, they smile at you while their heart is carrying ill feelings for you at that moment that they're smiling. Or they smile at you while their heart has at-takabbur and they are looking down at you. They are thinking in their heart that they are much better than you. The people are not the same. All of the people, they're not the same. One should also hate for others what they hate for themselves. So anything that one dislikes or hates for it to happen to them, or for that thing to reach them, then he should also hate it for the other person and for the other people. This is even if it is a person that you don't naturally incline towards, even if it was that type of person. Subhanallah, I remembered a story which we've mentioned before. Shaykh Abdullah, may Allah raise his rank, he was walking one day with one of his students, and there were these two brothers that were standing. And the Shaykh had the habit of giving salam, saying assalamu alaikum if he saw a person in the street. Rahimahullah ta'ala. So he went up to these people and he said assalamu alaikum with goodness, seeking goodness for them, wanting goodness for them. And what happened? One of those two brothers, he pushed Shaykh Abdullah on the ground. The Shaykh came up to say assalamu alaikum, and he pushed Shaykh Abdullah on the ground. Subhanallah. Think for a moment, how would you feel if this happened to you? How would I feel if this happened to me? If you went up to someone to give salam, and that person pushed you down on the floor, how would you feel? It's important to think about this because it gives us some insight on what we would do and where we are, like on our journey, when it comes to these traits that we're talking about. Subhanallah, what did Shaykh Abdullah do? He put his hands up right away after being pushed on the ground. And he said, Allahumma hfazhu, Allahumma hfazhu. Oh Allah, protect him. Oh Allah, protect him. Like this, out loud. What would make a person do that? Like, think about it. What would make a person in a situation like that put his hand up and make dua for this person who pushed him on the ground? And he wasn't a kid. This is Sheikh Abdullah in Lebanon. Yani he was an older person, an elderly man. Well, after this happened, the other one who did not push him, the one that was standing with the one who pushed, he said to his friend, let's go to such and such area. So the other one said to him, no, I'll stay here. Subhanallah. So that other one went. And a bomb came down or something like that, and it hit him and he died. It hit the area that he was in, that one that left, and he died. Right after this. And that other one, whom Shaykh Abdullah made dua for, who pushed the Shaykh down on the floor, he was protected. Years later, after he had started learning with the Jam'iyyah, the association and things like that, he saw the Shaykh again, and he went up to him and he said, Shaykh, I am so-and-so from such and such day. Shaykh Abdullah told him, yes, I remember. And then he proceeded to tell the Shaykh something which means like, forgive me. And the Shaykh told him that there's nothing, that he was forgiven. Subhanallah. When that happened, many of the students of the Shaykh, they found out about this story because they heard it from this man. Before that, Shaykh Abdullah did not talk about this story to anyone. He himself did not mention it to anyone. Usually when something like that happens, the person rushes home, calls their friend, can you believe what happened to me? Can you believe what so-and-so said to me? The person usually doesn't resort to Allah first. They resort to a human, a creation of Allah. But it's better for the person to resort to Allah. The dua that Shaykh Abdullah said is, Allahumma ahfadhhu, Allahumma ahmihi. Ameen, Allahumma ameen. You said any advice on how the person can overcome the feeling in the heart of the harm that another caused them? The person can make dua. Some people say, I will not forgive them. I will take my right from them on the Day of Judgment. And this is something that one can do. If someone harmed you, they were unjust to you religiously, you have the right to wait until the Day of Judgment. You can't harm them, unjustly. You cannot. But you could wait until the Day of Judgment, but what is better is to forgive them. What is better for you is to forgive them, lillahi ta'ala. And by doing that, you would be rewarded. And some people, they find this really hard too, to forgive, to pardon another person. But the quicker that one of us can get accustomed to forgiving and pardoning, the better it is for us. Because it only makes us better Muslims and it gets us closer to the acceptance of Allah. So the longer that we are people that hold grudges and these types of feelings in our hearts, we're just delaying ourselves from a higher rank. So if the person thinks about all of that, this is a great motivator. Just thinking about all of that is a great motivator. And seeing oneself for the situation that they're in, and knowing that there is something better, and there's something that is more praised. There are people that are upon that thing which is better, women and men. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam also said, وَمَا زَادَ اللَّهُ عَبْدًا بِعَفْوٍ إِلَّا عِزًّا. That Allah, the Exalted, would increase the person in honor by them pardoning others for the sake of Allah. This only increases us in honor. So when the person thinks about all of these things, maybe if they make a list of all of the motivators, all of these praised things, praised outcomes and merits of being someone who pardons, and they regularly look at that and check in with themselves, I think that this would help. Dua for the person, not against them. Yes, that's another one. Making dua for the person and not against them. This is another one that would help the person towards that, towards pardoning them and forgiving them. Making dua for them. And making dua, supplicating to Allah to make this easier on one. And striving towards that. You see, we all have an opportunity while we are alive, right? We can acquire any good deed and any praise trait that we want. Subhanallah, imagine a person walks into a completely halal restaurant, and they say to them, you can eat whatever you want on us from the buffet. And they go to the buffet and they see all types of food and all types of desserts. And the person is like, I don't even know which one to go to first. I don't know which one to eat first. I don't know which one to pick. In this world, as long as we are alive, all of these good deeds that we talk about, all of these praised attributes, they are attainable bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. They are attainable for every one of us bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. That doesn't mean that we're all going to reach them. Some of us might choose to do something else with our time. And that's usually what happens. People want to do something else with their time. And want to put their effort in something else. And want to hang out with specific people and keep doing that. And keep going there. And keep eating that. And keep doing the things that they're doing. Instead of making the changes that we would need to make in order to actually attain that thing which we admire, which we look up to and we say, wow, wow, people have that? Subhanallah, I want to be like that. But you could, and I could too. We just have to put in that effort. And the thing is that most of us don't usually put in that effort. However, it's good to know that it's attainable. It's good to know that these things are reachable. We could actually reach them. The difference in people is in their determination. All of us here, we don't have the same determination. Subhanallah, we don't. I don't know your determinations. Maybe they're much, much higher than my determination. But I do know that we're not all on the same determination. That's why some people attain certain things and some people don't. Because it comes down to how bad do you want it. A lot of things come down to this. And sometimes working towards a specific trait would mean that you hang out less with certain people, or you talk less with certain people, or you don't even see certain people, for example, or something like that. And that might bring up other issues for you from that side. However, if you know that what you're doing is what Allah accepts and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam accepts, then you keep doing it. And without a doubt, you're going to get hardships. If you are on this path, without a doubt, you will get hardships. People will harm you. Other hardships will fall upon you. That doesn't mean you're doing something bad. Like one of our teachers was saying, he was saying that some people, they think like, oh, if I start praying, then my hardships will go away. If I start praying, these calamities will stop. But that's not the way that it is. If you start praying and you're getting closer to the acceptance of Allah and His obedience, you're gonna get hardships. Allah the Exalted revealed to His Prophet, إِذَا أَحَبَّ اللَّهُ عَبْدًا إِبْتَلَاهُ. If Allah accepts a slave of His, He afflicts him. He doesn't give him the dunya and everything in it, يعني to lavish in it. No, He afflicts him. Because that slave, insha'Allah, he would be patient with that hardship and his rank would rise. And then he gets another hardship that's stronger because now his patience is stronger. So the next affliction would be stronger on him. And then he's patient with that, so his rank goes up even more. And every time he goes up like that, different types of blessings come to him. He experiences different types of blessings, different merits of things. Things that many of us might not even know. There are many types of blessings that exist in the dunya, that if we don't experience them, we won't know about them. For example, things that come to the person who's making dua in the last third of the night, because they wake up at that time. There are blessings that those who are up at that time would experience, if Allah grants it to them. And so the one who's not up at that time, how would they experience that? Treating others the way that one wants to be treated. Think of all the ways that you would like to be treated. And then think, do I really do that? Do I also extend that same thing to others? And think of how it feels when someone treats you kindly or in a good way, or pardons you. If you wronged someone, how would you feel if they say, it's okay, don't worry about it, I forgive you? Doesn't that give you such a nice feeling? And it takes that weight off of your shoulders. And we also said that one should hate for others what they hate for themselves. Anything that one dislikes or hates to happen with them, then he in turn and she in turn would hate for that to happen with their brother or sister in Islam. And for other people as well, not just for Muslims. We hate al-kufr, for example. We hate for anyone that we know to fall into al-kufr, and for anyone that we don't know to fall into al-kufr. We hate that the kuffar are upon al-kufr. We don't make dua for them to be upon kufr, a'udhu billah. We don't want them to be kuffar. If one of them embraced al-Islam, the Muslims would rejoice. If Netanyahu embraced al-Islam, we would be so happy. He would be forgiven for every single sin that he's ever committed. How can we not be happy for him? It shows you the power of Allah, that a person like that, if Allah willed, he would embrace Islam. Absolutely. So we love for them the goodness that we love for ourselves. We hate the things that they do. And while they're kuffar and doing these things and harming the Muslims, obviously we don't like them. Obviously. But if it comes down to it, do we want goodness for them? We do want goodness for them. We want them to embrace al-Islam. We want them to be safe in the hereafter. So this is even if there's a person that you don't naturally incline towards, or you don't speak much to, for example. you still should love the good for them and hate for the bad thing to reach them, for anything bad to reach them. At times, one is advised to stay away from a certain person. Like a husband might say to his wife, I don't want you speaking to so-and-so. Or I don't prefer for you to hang out with such and such woman. And he would have said that out of a wisdom. Something he knew, for example, something that he witnessed, and he said this to his wife. Maybe he saw something that was not praised, so he advised his wife to limit her interactions with that person or to stay away completely. Or between two friends, for example, one friend might advise the other friend for a wisdom. Yani not to try to take a stab at another Muslim, no. For a wisdom, they want what's better for them, so they say, I would prefer for you to use your time doing something more beneficial than going out or than hanging out with this person, for example. And in these cases, it doesn't always mean that that person was a bad person or that we don't care for them. No, just that one wants what is better or something different for their spouse or their friend. But we still love what we love for ourselves, for that Muslim. Yani this is how it should be, that we should love those things that we love for ourselves for them. And we hate for them all of those things that we would hate for ourselves. Those bad situations, those humiliating situations, we hate that for them. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, "Man ahabba an yuzahzah 'anil nar wa yudkhala al-jannah فلتأته منيته وهو يؤمن بالله واليوم الآخر وليأتي إلى الناس بما يحب أن يؤتى إليه." That whoever loves to be distanced from hellfire and admitted into paradise, then let him die while believing in Allah and the last day, and let him treat the people how he likes to be treated. This includes the women as well. Of course, someone asked me earlier, why does it only say he? And I said this is how it was revealed, but in these general advices, it includes the women as well. That's why sometimes I tend to say he or she, him or her. Yeah, it includes the women as well. الشيخ جميل حليم الله تعالى يحفظه ويبارك بعمره, he said, the one who implements this hadith and adheres to its meanings will be amongst the God-fearing slaves of Allah, those who are successful on the Day of Judgment. And I think we will stop here, and insha'Allah ta'ala next week we'll continue with the other hadith. Shaykh Abdullah, may Allah raise his rank, he did mention that a person can reach al-wilayah in a few months, like 6 months or so, even less than that if Allah willed, of course. And some people would hear that and say, oh, I'll just work really hard sometime down the line, like some years later, and I'll try to reach it in a few months. Subhanallah. Just because the Shaykh said this is possible doesn't mean that it's like that for everyone. For some people, they would work for 50 years and still not reach al-wilayah, because they have so many things in them that need fixing. And so the intelligent person would not put something off like that and say, oh, I'll work hard like 20 years later. Obviously, they may not live for that long. But from another perspective, they may never reach it. Because there are some things that, for some people, they would take years to fix. Try for this next month that's coming, December, let us all try, from here until then, I'm saying, even from right now until next week, but let's say until next month, until the end of December, let us try to implement this hadith. Alhamdulillah, we are all believers, but I mean specifically the part that says, and treat others the way that you would like to be treated. And that includes every time someone is harmful to you, you respond with goodness and generosity and genuine kindness. Let's see how easy that is. And if you don't think that is easy to do for a few days or like a month like this, how could a person expect to all of a sudden, after training themselves for 20, 30 years on not doing it, that it just hops in their lap and it just becomes a trait of theirs? Subhanallah. It's not easy. May Allah Ta'ala make it easy for me and for you. Allahumma ameen ya Rabb. May Allah make this easy for me and for you. May Allah make this easy for me and for you. Allahumma ameen. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. Yes, may Allah Ta'ala make us amongst those who are always conscious of this. Allahumma ameen ya Rabb. May Allah grant us that. Allahumma ameen. Sometimes we expect too much from the people around us and the people that we associate with. We might see a good attribute in them and all of a sudden we expect from them to be like Shaykh Abdullah. We are not Shaykh Abdullah. I am not Shaykh Abdullah. So we shouldn't expect from everyone around us to be perfect believers, because it's really rare to find someone like that. It's really rare. May Allah make us amongst those rare people. Allahumma ameen. Barakallahu feekum. لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم رب اغفر لي وللمؤمنين والمؤمنات رب اغفر لي وللمؤمنين والمؤمنات رب اغفر لي وللمؤمنين والمؤمنات جزى الله محمدا عنا خيرا وعزا وفخرا اللهم آمين صلوات ربي وسلامه عليك يا سيدي يا رسول الله صلوا عليه. Send الصلاة والسلام على النبي عليه الصلاة والسلام. And I'll see you next week, inshaAllah ta'ala. Jumu'ah Mubarakah.